It's a remake of the interview I had with Ted, kind of pretending he's open and talks about why he's doing what he's doing. And it's pretty factual for everything I could find. The second part's personality development of his life. But when he's born, he's just an ordinary child back in Philadelphia, living with his grandparents. He's an illegitimate child. He's 2 years old, and the family moves up to the Northwest because other family are up there and saying, come up, be with us. His mother, Louise, marries John Bundy, and Ted's name becomes Ted Bundy. And other kids are born into the family. Ted doesn't get along very well with his stepfather. His mother, he sees, is controlling. And he starts getting into this fantasy life. He's upstairs in his room, and he's daydreaming. And what he's doing, on one hand, he's listening to all of these old serials that were available back in the 40s. You know, Sky King, Tom Mix, Lone Ranger, and all of this. And he's living the parts. But he's also listening to political speeches. For some reason, he loves them, and he memorizes them. Well, he doesn't get along. He doesn't really fit in with the kids. They like him in the neighborhood, but he's not anything special. One lady I talked to who knew him in high school says he was just Ted. He was just there, and that's all. You know, nothing special about him. But when he gets in his early teens, he's really heavy in this fantasy life. He's in this new home. They're upstairs looking down from out of his room. He sees in the bathroom of the next house. He watches. He goes out and he starts going out into the night. And this was a thing that became more and more and more common of him. Go out in the night, window peeking, and getting, you know, the crime books, true crime. Remember those magazines? And they had a semi-nude woman, dead woman on the front. You know, he really gets into that. And so he's into crime novels. He's into all kinds of sexual stuff. And he has a paper route, and this is questionable. He has a paper route, and it goes past this girl's place within about a mile and a half of his place. And she disappears, and there's a question of, did he kidnap her and kill her? Personally, I think he did. You know, but there's still an open question about that. He doesn't date during high school. He's very, very inadequate. He's got one good friend. And so as a common example, he's in school and another kid comes up and says, hey, to his friend, would you like to go to this gathering? It's a party tonight. His friend says, yeah, sure, that sounds fun. And he just ignores Ted. And he walks off. And that's kind of the way it was. When he gets to be possibly a junior, but at least a senior in high school, he takes up skiing, and he doesn't have a car. He doesn't have a Volkswagen at this point. He takes up skiing, and he's up there on the slopes, and he's skiing real well, and they're admiring him, and wow, he's one of the guys now. Going up, coming back, he is one of the elite in the school. They get back, and the guys are going to a party tonight, a dance. Ted goes home. He starts developing this huge career plan about going through college, getting into politics, working with the government, going to China, reestablishing the relationships between China and America. He's all in favor of helping the blacks. You know, he's for the underdog, and people think this is great. Well, he goes through his freshman year, and it doesn't go very well because too many fraternities, and he doesn't have any money, he doesn't fit in. And then he goes to the University of Washington, and he meets this girl. We call her name Marjorie. She's about a year older. She's beautiful. She's been a part-time model. She's very intelligent. Her father comes from the San Francisco area, and just wonderful, you know. And she takes to him, he takes to her, and they're together for a year or two, and it's just, oh, to him it's wonderful because here is someone that he can show off. Look what I've got, you know. But then he goes down to Carlisle, Stanford University for the summer, and he's thinking she's going to be there, but she's not. She's still at the University of Washington, finishing up some classes. He starts getting real antsy. She's not here. He's loving these classes, but she's not here. He calls her almost every day, and she then begins to think this guy is too controlling. And she says, I'll be down on my birthday, and then we can do some things. Okay. As one guy said, this was another killer who is very much like Ted Bundy, who gave me excellent stuff. He says, he's talking about his teens, late teen years. The weaker I became, the more dependent I became on appearances. The neurotic striving for power serves as a protection against insignificance. The probability that one thing, that probability is the one thing that fall does. Fall is when someone says, geez, you look stupid, you know. And this type of person who feels very inadequate, they're trying to pretend they're up here on the pedestal. They get knocked down around the bottom. Then they have to get back up on the pedestal. The fall gives rise to feelings of insignificance that have long been shoved away. That's what I was running away from all my life. Deep inside, I'm convinced insignificance is a fact. Not just a feeling, but a fact. And life has been spent overcoming that or compensating for that, so that when that feeling arises and overwhelms, it takes on a sense of danger. My life, my being, everything is at stake. Everything is on the line. I'm a nobody. The fall is insignificant, and the deed, the crime is, I am somebody. So the crime is bring themselves back up on that pedestal. I am now somebody. And this guy said later on, after involving in all of this stuff in homicide, he says when that need comes to restore yourself back on the pedestal, he says you'll do almost anything to achieve that, because you have to be up on top. Of course, when they're up there, it becomes much easier to knock them back down again. And then they have to keep building up, you know. So, Marjorie, when they went out to dinner, said, I'm sorry, Ted, but I just want to be friends. I'm not ready to get serious. And to him, his whole world fell apart. Now, they remained friends. They continued contacting each other. But how are we doing on time? Okay, gotta hurry. But Ted then, he goes back up north. He tries to go to college, he can't. He's given up all of the Asian studies stuff because he's lost total interest in that. And throughout here, he gets involved in some political campaigns as a worker. He says, that was wonderful. He goes up and he tries to get into that, and the guy doesn't get elected. So he decides to go back east. He goes back to visit his relatives. While he's there, he goes up to Vermont, because his cousin, when he was about 14, 15 years old, his cousin said, Ted, you're illegitimate. He never knew that. He says, no, I'm not. He's crying, and he's just falling apart. He says, come, I'll show you, because the two are talking about what they're going to do in the future, you know. And the cousin says, I'm going to drive a Rolls Royce, and I'm going to do all these wonderful things in Europe. And Ted says, so am I. He says, no, you're illegitimate. So they go up and they open the trunk, and there's the papers. Father, empty. So when he's up to Vermont, he checks it out. Gets his civil records, finds no father listed, illegitimate. And he has been delving heavily into fantasy at this point. So he comes down to New York City, 34th Street, gets involved in all of the porn shops. In fact, he even goes to one of the universities and looks at some of the medical books on bodies, you know, and such. So he's really getting into this. Comes back again, and then still nothing is working out. He goes back up goes back east again, and he's going to go to Temple University. It doesn't work, and then he goes out on the New Jersey beach one day, beautiful day, 2 girls there. He picks them up, they're heading back, and that's his first 2 homicides. He kills them, comes back to, now when this happens, the whole personality changes of the person. Outwardly, they may look the same. Inwardly, they're very, very different, because now they've killed someone. Comes back, meets Liz in the Sandpiper Tavern. She thinks this guy's wonderful. They both get drunk. He takes her to her place, doesn't sleep with her that night. She wakes up next morning. She's still in bed by herself. Ted is out there. He has some bacon and eggs. She has her daughter. Ted's very nice. He brings her flowers. He does all this wonderful thing. She says, "This is my Phantom Prince." She wrote a book, Phantom Prince. I haven't seen the 2nd edition, unfortunately. My guess is she got a tremendous amount of criticism from it. Ted Bundy's my Phantom Prince. He was wonderful, you know, and she describes him that way. Anyway, to make a long story short, he keeps doing all of this nightlife stuff. And then Marjorie comes back into his life, the summer of '73. And so he's got Liz, and he's got his own apartment, but he stays with Liz as well, and they have this, quote, wonderful life. And except he's getting more and more distant. Marjorie comes back in the picture. Ted's saying to Marjorie, "Yeah, I think it could really work out between us." Christmas comes. Liz goes down to Utah, comes down to her parents. Ted's up there. Marjorie comes up. They spend the holidays, Christmas and the week after, together. And Marjorie's really pushing now for him to propose. Christmas Eve, he proposes. She climbs, not Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve. She gets on the plane the next day, flies back, San Francisco, drive down to her place. "I'm engaged." And she told me, she said, Ted had done a complete 180-degree turnaround. Because before, she says, he was inadequate, he wouldn't stand up for himself, very apologetic. She says, now, he just had all of this strength, you know. So, within 2 days, he goes into this college student's downstairs apartment, and he beats her senseless. She lives, but I think tremendous, create a lot of brain damage, and he's gone. Rapes her and he's gone. You know, when you look at the crime, you know this guy was practiced. You know, it wasn't like he just happened to be walking along and there she was. You know. Okay, he then starts killing again and again and again and again. So now you see the escalation, and then Lake Sammamish, he took 2 victims. His girlfriend Liz, he shoved her head under the water when they're having a picnic, and they're out in the Yakima River, and she thinks she's going to drown, you know, but he's killed 2 victims. He gives his name as Ted. 10,000 people on the beaches that day. One of the TV stations is getting some TV viewage taken some shots of all of this. But he's lined up to come down to the University of Utah. He comes down to the University of Utah. He starts killing again. And an interesting thing happens. The missionaries approach him. And he decides he's going to take the missionary lessons. He takes them. He gets baptized. The missionaries think he's sincere. The bishop thinks he's sincere. And I asked him, Ted, why did you join the Mormon Church? You didn't even believe in God. And he says, well, I thought it could give me some structure, and in essence what he was saying, I was hoping it would help me hold together. So he tries to kidnap Carol Duranch. She gets away. That same night, and this is significant, that same night he goes up to Bountiful, and they're having a play up there, and he kidnaps Debbie Kent. He walks in with his books, and he's got this cast on his arm and starts trying to get people to help him out to his car. Everybody's seeing him. Absolutely stupid. But he kidnaps Debbie Kent, and I don't think they ever found her body, unfortunately. But then he gets caught, about 8 months later. I do my report, and I say, I don't think this is a very good guy, because he's the judge is trying to decide, should he go on probation or get locked up? Because so many people say, hey, this is a good guy, he could never do it. I'm sure he's not guilty. Jerry Thompson, the detective, and I got an interview in my book by him. It's rather interesting as he talks about what Ted was like as he saw him.